Matthias Beier is here from Christian Theological Seminary. He is what one might call an expert in this field and offered to be with us to offer some of his insights. He's going to give us just a few minute insight as to why this matters, and then we're going to take some questions and answers. Some of you who know this sanctuary knows that when the wind blows, we can hear it through the bricks. We like to think that that's a spirit well beyond each of us, and that is happening now. Matthias, come on up. Don, come on up.
While he's getting mic'd up, I'll just say thank you again for everybody showing up, and hope you have a lot of questions. The man you're about to hear from, he's a psychoanalyst, an author, a religion scholar, and a workshop leader. He is a Ph.D. and, like Lori said, the expert on what you just heard. Probably made many of you uncomfortable. It got awfully quiet while it was on. So with that, I will introduce again Dr. Matthias Beier, and it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening. Good evening. Hi, how are you all after such a heavy week? Right, we need to breathe, right? We need to breathe in and out. Yeah, very heavy. So, I want to say something. You pronounce my name very beautifully, and I want to tell you a little bit about where I'm coming from. I'm originally from Germany, so that's where the pronunciation Matthias Beier comes from. And I have to say to you, and I do not say this in hyperbole in any way, this does take me back to what happened in Germany. It really does. The Christian nationalist movement in Germany was called the German Christians. That was the majority of Christians, mostly Protestants, because the Catholic Christians were also persecuted, and then in 1934 signed a concordat, where basically the person who then became the Pope later, Pope Pius XII, had basically signed the right of way of his priests to oppose Hitler. We're not in that moment here, partly because we have a separation of church and state. But as you know, the separation of church and state is itself under assault. A lot of what's happening right now, and I debated Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith in November. I don't know if any of you might have seen that. If you have not seen that, you can see it on the Indy Star website. The Indy Star, Indianapolis Star, hosted the debate. And Micah Beckwith is a fervent Christian nationalist. And he argues very forcefully that, just like Robert Jeffress in that movie, that the United States was founded as a Christian nation. Now I want to say something to you is that what they're doing with the Constitution and with the Founding Fathers is the same thing that they're doing with the Bible. They're hijacking it. They're hijacking the Bible. And also, most importantly, in my view, Christian nationalism is hijacking the word God. When the word God is used, it is used in a very tribal, small way. I teach pastoral theology and clinical mental health counseling at Christian Theological Seminary, and I have studied psychology and religion. And part of what we know in the psychology of religion when we try to understand what is healthy faith or healthy uses of faith, and when is it harmful to people, one of the researchers is Kenneth Pergament, and he has several books. One is called The Psychology of Religion, the Psychology of Religion and Coping, and then one, Spiritually Integrated Psychotherapy. And he suggests that one of the forms of bad faith is when you make God really small. That is really no God anymore, right? Now, I do want to get to your questions, but I want to say a couple of things to help you understand. Because if we want to counter the madness that's happening right now in the name of God, we need to understand the driving forces. And what I mean by that is the emotional driving forces, the existential driving forces, the spiritual driving forces. What we have seen beautifully in this movie is the history, right? You learned a lot about history right now. And it's scary. I also studied sociology, so I know about the sociological research as well. But what I believe is very, very important is that we understand that this whole movement is driven by fear. It is driven by a very, very profound fear. And if you want to in any way counter that, you need to on some level become empathic with the fear that is driving the movement. I know that's a lot to ask of us. I'm a therapist, and I work with people who are Trump supporters. I am never trying to convince them differently. That's not my role as a therapist. Absolutely not. I'm not a politician in the consulting room. That's not my job. It's like when you go to a doctor, you don't want your doctor to try to convince you to vote for somebody, right? That's not your job. That's not what your job. But when I speak in a setting like this here, in a cultural setting, in a social setting, my responsibility, I feel, is to help you understand why is making God small and making power very big, and the fear that's underlying there is happening. So, religion, we all are partly here because we believe that there is something bigger than death. That's partly why people go to church. We, on some level, believe that there's something bigger than loss. That there's more than despair. That is the origin of why people started believing in God. About 300,000 years ago. Because we couldn't accept that death has the last word. In the Bible, Paul says, death, where thy sting, right? Goes in that direction. Reverend Barber, with whom I have marched, I've been part of the Indiana Poor People's Campaign, says, we need a resurrection, right? Now, the fear of death, though, that we try to counter with faith, makes us believe there's something greater than death, God. That is also something that is going on in the Christian nationalist belief. So there we share something. Now, part of the problem in Christian nationalism is that they're making God into something finite. Fear of death has to do with us being finite, right? I'm a finite human being. I don't have control over everything. I will die one day. I have limitations, right? God forgives me, right? God helps us overcome those things. When we believe in the infinite, God is the infinite. God being able to help us believe in life after death, or help us believe in going on when we have a loss. Great. But as soon as we tie this belief in God into something that's merely finite, that is bigger, but it's finite, like a group, like a nation, like a political party, like a big leader, then we are in what the Bible calls idolatry. And that is what's happening in Christian nationalism. But it does it because the fear that's driving it is we're going to hang ourselves on this movement because that is how we will be effective. And so if you have members in your family that are Christian nationalists, you have to understand why this is compelling. Or if you yourself sometimes think, yeah, why not? Right? Think about what fears are driving you. Now, the reason why, the second thing that I want to say, and then we'll go to the questions, is that the fear that, so when you're part of a big movement, and you saw, did you see how the people were cheering and like, yeah, it's almost like as if they were standing up there, right? It's an identification. You identify with the group or with the leader, and that makes you lose your fears. But as Marjorie Taylor Greene will tell you, she was in this movie. She's out. She's out. Once you're going against it, I have students that come from cult-like congregations that tell me, once you start thinking for yourself, you're shut out, right? But here's the thing that I want to tell you as somebody who works in psychology. The fear may be consciously gone, but the fear is not gone completely. It is pushed down, and guess where it shows up? This is studies in prejudice. You know where the fear shows up? When you push it down and you don't really deal with it, it shows up in your neighbor. It shows up in the person out there, in the other group, in the stranger, in, what would we say today? In the immigrant. It showed up for Jerry Falwell in black people. He wanted his congregation to be a good-looking congregation. It shows up in other way, the other outside. And so now you fight the fear outside there. So we have to understand that too. That's what's driving anti-immigrant rhetoric. Now, usually, you may have heard of this poem by one of the German resistors. First they came for me. First they came for, he said, the socialists, and then the communists, and so on, and then the Jews, and then they came for me. You know why he said the communists and the social democrats in that poem? We are having midterm elections coming up in the fall, and I hope you don't have to mark my words. Hitler got the emergency laws passed in Parliament because the evening before, he rounded up social democratic and communist parliament members and put them in the first concentration camp. When you hear the rhetoric against leftists, take it very, very serious. Take it very serious. Without him being able to put over 80 people into the first concentration camp, he would never have been able to get the emergency powers he had. We only need one big emergency in this country, and the Constitution can be suspended for all purposes. So, this farming out fear is part of it. I want to say to you that the fear that is going on is a fear of scarcity. It's a fear of scarcity. And we can counter this when we are in despair. Like, this is a very desperate kind of feeling movie, right? And this conversation is very somber. But what we need to remember is the voice in Genesis 2, in the Garden of Eden, before the voice of the serpent comes. You all remember that God says in that first chapter, you may eat from all the trees in the garden. And then what does the serpent do? Serpent says, oh, did God say you should not eat from any of the trees in the garden? Have you ever thought about that? That is the scarcity principle. The fear of scarcity is the voice of the serpent. And we are tempted by it. We're tempted by that. We're very tempted by that fear. And when we see a movie like that, we could get very desperate. Oh, nothing is going to be good anymore. Don't believe it. Don't believe it. There's a lot of abundance. There's a lot of abundance. We have to remember that. Now let's get to the questions. Yes?
Just to go back into your very helpful words. Can you go back and tell me
Oh, he's going to bring you a microphone. Sorry. Yes.
Hi.
Yes, hi.
I just wanted to ask if you could go over again where this fear comes from.
Yeah.
Initially, I thought you were saying it was mortality.
Yeah.
Then, would you mind?
Yes. No, it is mortality. So religion ultimately is an answer to our fear of mortality. That's ultimately an answer. But we also call mortality finitude, our limitations, right? And fear of being insignificant, like when you lose meaning, right? That's when I was a hospital chaplain. One of my teachers said, when people are in hospital, there are many types of death, basically. Big death, small death. And so when you have sickness, I myself went through cancer at one point. And so I'm familiar with fear, right? Now all of these things remind us of our mortality. And one of the strategies to counter a fear of mortality is to associate us with strength, with power. And Christian nationalism, in many respects, says if you only associate yourself with us, and God has blessed us, then you don't have to be afraid anymore, right? Yeah. You're welcome. Thank you. Don't be shy. Free for all.
I find it very interesting that you speak to fear.
Well, that's because fear
Is this all right?
Yeah.
Because I have thought that some of the choices people have been making is because they actually fear climate change is going to end living things on the earth. I know young people who
Yes.
have chosen not to have children
Yes.
because they think that life is going to end on earth.
Yes. Oh, okay, sorry. Yes. No, I think, again, you're absolutely right. The context we're in, climate change is very real. But what's happening with climate change in the current political sphere, there's a strong attempt to deny it. In psychology, we call that a defense mechanism or coping mechanism, right? You just deny the reality and then it's not there anymore. Of course it is there. We see it in the weather. We see it in the flooding. And now, you can deny this and then say, hey, no, when you deny it, we can just treat it as if it was omnipotently available to us. Like the fantasy that we all would go to Mars is one of those fantasies. That we don't have to take care of this planet anymore because Mars is so much better. Have you ever seen Mars? I mean, it's not very appealing to me. And so, in my mind, again, another defense mechanism that is very important in Christian nationalism is omnipotent control. That's actually a real thing. That you are afraid, and then you say, hey, I'm gonna try to control everything. And then that is how I'll lose my fear. But it's not gonna make the climate better. It's not gonna make us survive, right? In reality, it's fantasy.
Practically speaking, you had a discussion with our Lieutenant Governor,
Yeah.
and I'd be interested in knowing some of the talking points that Lieutenant Governor Beckwith brought up in defense of the Christian nationalism, or did he dance around the subject? Or how did that conversation go?
Yes, yeah, thank you for that question. So again, you can watch the whole debate on the IndyStar website. I also have written about it on I have a Substack, that's a newsletter called Religion and Society on the Couch. And outside, I think we have something where you can sign up for it if you want to. But he's very much arguing in similar ways here, that one of his main talking points was, without the Bible, there's not going to be any morality in the land. And therefore we need to bring the Bible back into the government and make laws that are based on the Bible. What? Well, and so now, and then he would argue that that's what the founding fathers wanted. He also would say, I very much argue, I've written a book called The Violent God Image. I have a few copies out there myself. And I explain a lot of how this works actually in theology. A lot of this has developed through 2,000 years of theology. This Christian nationalism stuff really started with Emperor Constantine. It started with him. Before Emperor Constantine, he didn't even make the Christian nation. He started it. You know what he had? He had a vision. The day he fought a battle at the Milvic Bridge, it was 312 or something like that. And he had a vision that if he only converted to Christ, he would win. So he wins the battle. And In the battle, he put the cross on shields for the first time. He wins the battle, and he converts to be a Christian. That's where the emperor, for the first time in Rome, became a Christian. It took another 60, 70 years until Theodosius I made Christianity the state religion of Rome. And so, I come from Europe. Most American immigrants, or many American immigrants here, come because religious wars were fought. And they were fought because this nation says, our God is bigger. No, our God, and they're all the Christian God. But it's the Lutheran version, or the Calvinistic version, or the papal version. And that's how they fought each other. They killed each other over interpretations of the Eucharist, of the Lord's Supper. So, we have to understand that there's a long history. And Reverend Barber said it very accurately. Slavery was very much based on a certain form of white Christian nationalism. It has been around for a long time. Now, the reason why it right now comes up with these forms has a lot to do that a lot of big shifts happen, demographic shifts are happening. And so the majority is under threat of becoming a minority. But also we have to understand that theologically something very important happened in that whole process. That they didn't really focus on that explicitly that much. But one of the things that you saw Paula White. She heads the White House Office of Faith. She's considered to be an apostle. When I grew up, I was taught that the apostles stopped with the 12 apostles, right? Most of you probably heard that too, right? Well, guess what? In the 1970s, all of a sudden, people are saying this whole business about the end times, the way they interpreted the end times, Armageddon, the big battle, people started saying, okay, there are actually different ways of reading Revelation. And did anyone grow up Calvinist here? No? Okay. Well, have you ever heard of millennialism? Very important. Very important. Millennialism, post-millennialism, pre-millennialism. I'm not going to go into all the details, but what I can tell you is for a long time, this whole end time beliefs was about we are going to have a battle between good and evil, and then Christ returns, right? And this is going to be the battle of Armageddon, where the devil is going to come, and that battle happens. And so we're basically in the end times, and it's going to be bad and all of that. That was one form. The form that is driving right now Christian nationalism is not that form actually. The form that we're having right now is a form called post-millennialism, which believes that actually the Battle of Armageddon already happened when the temple fell in 70 CE. And that then a millennium came, and now what has to happen for Christ to return is that the entire world has to be dominated by Christian values. So that is where you heard the reference to the 7 mountains mandate. Did you hear that? And I recommend that you look up books if you're interested in that, about the 7 mountains mandate. They reference this here. The goal is to saturate the leaders in all of these mountains, these 7 mountains, whether it's the media or government, family, the arts and so on, school, education, of course. And when we are able to control all of that, we Christian leaders, which are closer to God, then Christ can return. So they're literally believing that they are responsible for Christ's return. Now this is where from a psychological perspective, I call it what it is. You're playing God. You're playing omnipotent. You're confusing yourself with God, and that is the unfortunate thing. You saw one of the key leaders who started this is Rushduni, Rusas Rushduni. He's the child of Armenian immigrants, and he wrote a 2-volume book on the Institutes of Biblical Law, and he is the mastermind behind a lot of what's going on. He advocated for that the law in the Hebrew Bible, in Leviticus, should become the law of the land. And that is why you sometimes hear that, yes, adultery, people should get the death penalty. When you hear that there's a bill, as there was again in one of the states recently, that women who have abortions should be getting the death penalty. This is coming out of that mindset. So I want to help you understand that now where I sit, theologically, I believe that part of what's happening is that it's really the scarcity mentality. That's actually the voice of the serpent. And that is what is, and I'm not thinking of the devil. I don't personally believe in the devil. Psychologically, I believe that this is a lot of projection. But I think what happens in Genesis 3 leads then to Genesis 4. Like they're trying, in Genesis 3, the fruit means that they're trying to calm this fear that nothing is available with something final. That's what the fruit means. It has nothing to do with sexuality, by the way. Yes, let me just finish that one thought. And then, once they take that fruit and they try to use something finite to feel a good ground under their feet again, and it doesn't work, then they're embarrassed, right? Then they put the fig leaves on them. And then the children of that attitude are Cain and Abel. And in my view, what Christian nationalism right now, in many respects, is it's like Cain. Cain wanted to get the blessing from God, and cannot stand that Abel gets it and Cain does not get it. And so I want to help you understand why there is this anti-DEI movement. The anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion is happening theologically because they're saying these people are blessed. That's what we, progressive Christians are saying. The least of these, right, is blessed by God. That does not evoke empathy in Christian nationalists. There's a whole big movement of going against empathy. Have you heard that? Like the war on empathy. The reason why there's the war on empathy is because there is this mindset of if they are blessed, then I cannot get blessed. It's the Cain and Abel mindset.
So Matthias, I'm aware that we are at
Yes.
about 8:30.
Okay.
And you all have given us 2 hours of your evening. I see more hands, but I also know some of you need to retire for the evening. Matthias is going to be outside, I should say that, in our lobby where there are still cookies and tea and lemonade. And I think a few more questions in that environment would work just fine.
Sure.
And then those of you who need to depart may do that as well. So go with the blessing that there is still conversation. It will never end. And we have lots of work to do, but we are not alone. Thank you, everybody. We are here at St. Peter's, 10 o'clock on Sundays and many other nights of the week having these very discussions. So don't be a stranger. Thanks, everybody.